Hi, welcome to Watch and Learn with Handi Quilter. Today we're going to talk about loading your quilt. We're going to give you some tips and tricks for preparing your quilt top to load. We're going to give you tips for loading your quilt, and then we're going to end with tools that help in loading and managing your quilt while you're quilting. I'm Johnny Barfus. I'm a studio educator here with Handi Quilter. With me,
I'm Kristina Whitney, a studio educator here also at Handi Quilter.
So we're excited to have you here. All right, Kristina, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about leaders first.
Yes.
Okay.
So first of all, let's talk about what kinds of leaders that we have available.
Okay.
So here is our most commonly used leader. It is our studio leader. It's also part of our gallery set. Comes in different lengths depending on what size frame you have. So you can buy whatever size length you want, and you can also, if you're really crazy, cut them down to smaller lengths so you have more leaders, and then you don't stretch out your big leaders by using small baby quilts on that same leader repeatedly.
Right. So what sizes do you use at home?
I use all sizes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just have a whole bin of them because I do a lot of swapping quilts off and on my frame, so each quilt gets its own set of leaders.
Okay. We talked last time about the super leader.
Let's see that super leader. Do you have one there for me?
I do, and we got the measurements.
Okay.
So the super leader is 27 inches deep.
That's the depth, yes.
So that is from the distance from here to here,
Yes.
27 inches.
Yes, and the reason why you'd like to have this longer or deeper one is so that you're not bending over constantly to pin. So Johnny, can I get you to undo that backing bar there?
Yeah.
And we'll actually pull that super leader up. So on a studio frame, it can come all the way up to this top bar to pin, which makes it really nice on your back.
Right.
And if you have a gallery frame, it's even deeper, so it's harder to reach. So this extra length really helps save you.
Yeah. So if you have the gallery frame, that's the Forte and Infinity. These come standard with your frame purchase. So that super leader comes as part of your leader set. If you have the studio frame, that's the Amara, the Avante. Those come standard with just the same depth. That's the 17-inch depth.
Yep.
Again, if those are available for purchase, the super leader you can get separately,
yes,
or as part of the gallery set. So that's how they're listed on our website. We'll say the gallery set or the super leader is available individually.
Yep.
So we just want to be really clear on that. And again, it's 27 inches deep this way or 17 inches deep.
Yep.
Okay?
And again, you can get them in different lengths depending on your frame size, or you can just buy a big set and cut it down so it's not quite so long. And I just want to point out also that the leaders don't go all the way to the end of your poles. They stop about 6 inches because that's as far as your machine can go. So you don't want to think that you're going to be able to stitch that full length and have a quilt pinned on and then realize, oh, my machine can't go there. So they will be shorter than your poles.
Yeah, I've done that before.
I've got one on right now that's pretty close.
Pushing the limits.
Pushing the limits, yes.
Okay, so we have this one. We've already pinned this up here.
Mm-hmm. And we always make sure we smooth that leader out as we're
that one's
rolling. We're twisted back there. We'll let it fly for right now.
For right now.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about attaching your quilt to the leader. You have an example, right?
Yes. Let me pull that out here. Okay, so I mentioned just a minute ago that I have lots of projects that are always going at the same time, and so I have multiple sets of leaders. So this is just an example of a project. I can't even count how many times this has been put on and off of different machines. And so I've got a smaller leader set, so you can see that it is shorter in length on the leaders because I've cut it down. And my favorite part is I basted this on. So instead of pinning, I actually took this to my sewing machine, put a basting stitch on, and then that way, when I'm taking it on and off, I don't have to deal with the pins poking me, because I do that a lot. How many times do I say we need Band-Aids right next to our machines? Yeah, I like to bleed.
Yeah, me too.
So that's an option. If you don't want to pin, you can always baste onto your leaders. So.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about preparing, I'll take that,
preparing
your backing, and then what to do with a back that's not square.
Okay, so we want to have a good foundation when we're quilting, and our backing is one of those foundations. So if we start out with a backing that's not square, we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure.
Right.
So one way that I like to check to make sure that my backing is square is I will just fold it in half with the selvages, lining that up. Okay, so Johnny, I'm going to fling this up here and we'll see if we can see. If you look along this edge, down at that other end, it's not the same. So even though I measured the length might be the same, but it might be kind of a diagonal
Right.
shape.
A trapezoid?
Trapezoid.
I don't know, whatever we call it.
Yes, us and our math skills, not so great.
It's fine.
Okay, so if I wanted to make this square to start with, I'm going to fold it in half again, lining up my selvages, just like so. And then I would take a large square ruler or use my grid and trim this so that it is a straight line. And then I know that it is square, it should be fitting onto my leaders perfectly, and then I'm, again, having that good foundation to start with.
So if you are just doing quilting for yourself, just make sure you square that back up first. And again, if you have people bringing you quilts, you're quilting for others, ask them to do that for you before they do that. You know, and you might teach that. Like I remember my quilter before when I was paying for quilting, they were always teaching me different things that I could do to make my quilts better for them to quilt. So that's something you can add to your repertoire.
Yep. Start with the foundation.
Start with a good foundation. So next, let's talk about minky.
Ooh, everybody loves minky, right?
Right. Everyone loves the feel of minky on their
quilt. Who
quilt.
loves working with minky on their long arms?
We get a lot of questions. How should I pin on, or how should I attach my minky to the leaders?
Yes. So minky can be a little bit tricky to work with for some people, and there's a lot of people that are intimidated by it, but it is very usable. I love working with minky. Quick tip, if you are seaming the back, I'm going to share one of my embarrassing stories. You guys probably already know to not do this, but I just folded my backing in half because it was just a solid piece of fabric, and I seamed it along, but when I opened it up, the nap went one way and then the other way.
Right.
So learn from my mistakes. Don't seam your minky that way.
So make sure when you seam it, the nap's going in the same direction.
Yes.
And another tip, if like you have a directional top, the back should be directional as well, that your nap's going the same direction as the top.
Yes. Okay, so what do you think is the biggest concern with dealing with minky?
Stretch.
Stretch.
It's very stretchy.
Okay, so this minky, it stretches pretty good that direction. Going the other way, it doesn't really stretch much. Okay? So loading your minky is personal preference. Some people like to load the stretchy way across so that they have control as they're pinning to make sure it's not stretching out. And then as they're advancing and rolling that fabric, as they're tightening the bar, it's not stretching because that's the direction. So some people like to do it that direction. Some people like to turn it and do the selvage side on the bar because it lays flat and it's easy to pin on. If you do it that direction, you do have to be very careful when you're advancing that you don't over tighten the backing and stretch that minky out. Because if you stretch it out and you quilt on it, when you take it off, it's going to shrink back up and it's not always going to be pretty.
It's not going to be cute.
So those are some tips with minky. Do you have any other tips that you want to add?
No. I think I pin the stretchy so I can kind of control it, and then the other way rolled so I do it that way. What about you?
I actually do it both ways. And here's my reason why. Sometimes I get minky that has a seam in it. So let's talk about seams.
Let's talk about seamed backs, our next question.
So with seamed backs, I prefer to always have my seam going horizontal to the poles. And the reason for that is that when I'm rolling it up, I don't have all of that buildup of the seam in one spot. It's just spread out over the whole quilt. It just goes through one time, and it makes it a lot easier. So if I have minky and it's got a seam horizontally, I'll load it horizontally no matter which direction the stretch is.
Right. So this back we purposely pieced, we pieced it, but we loaded it so the seam was vertical. So we can show you how you would kind of, the tips you can use to adjust with that, right?
So sometimes you can't avoid loading it without the seam going vertically.
Right.
So you might have a quilt top that's directional and you have to load it that direction. So like we said, sometimes it's not avoidable. So let's give a couple tips. So Johnny, I'm going to put my ratchet down. Will you put your ratchet down on that one also? And then just tighten this up. And we're going to see if people can tell. We've got this seam here, so we've got lots of bulk right through here where I've rolled it over and over and over itself, which in turn makes our ends a little bit saggier.
These are loosey-goosey.
This is really tight right here and kind of loose on the ends. So there are a couple things that we can do.
Okay.
As you're rolling it up, I like to massage it here and like pull it even tighter so that it's kind of spreading it out a little bit more.
Right.
Another thing that works really nicely is to roll the backing back and forth on the poles.
Okay.
So,
which brings us to our first
show us that
item up for bid. Just kidding. So we were talking about this hand wheel. This is the Handi hand wheel, I think it's called.
The hand wheel kit.
The hand wheel kit.
Yes.
So the hand wheel comes on this back pole. You can add it to this front pole. We suggest you. Well, it only can fit really on this front pole well. You can't really put it on this one, but you really wouldn't want to. But it fits really well right here on the front pole. And so then I can take off my ratchets. And
I like to call this the double Dutch.
If we were doing jump rope, this is a really small back, but so you can go back and forth.
Yeah, and it just eases in that tightness, the fullness a little bit more, so it's not quite so evident when you get to the top of that backing. One thing I do want to point out with our hand wheel kit is that it is frame specific. So if you have a studio frame, you need to order the studio one. If you have a gallery frame, you need to order the gallery. And you can actually use it on either pole, but you can only use it on one of the front poles at a time.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, because I've switched mine back and forth. And it does work, but you can't put one on each of these poles. They run into each other and cause problems. So, Johnny.
So up next is?
Let's stitch.
Okay, so you're going to show us how to put your batting on. And we did have another question on in the Facebook comments on which direction to put the batting. So which one do you put up or down?
I like to feel my batting. So. Go ahead and feel yours. Some brands you can feel it a lot more. Some are kind of bumpy, and then one side's a little bit smoother.
Yeah.
I put the bumpies down.
Bumpies down.
So I've heard people say pimples down, dimples up, because you don't want to see the pimples, so they go on the bottom. And so those are the little pokey outies, because we all know how that works.
Right.
So I'm going to turn mine over.
This one is upside down. So now we have the bumpies down.
Yep. And I am going to just slide this under here.
Okay.
Johnny, what's another great trick for getting your batting in? What feature
the pole
do we
cradles.
have? Yes.
We talked about those before as well.
Yeah.
And if you don't have these, you can add them to your frame. So that just gives you a little space under there.
And I actually added the pole cradles to my old frame, and I did it all by myself. I did the tools. I didn't cry. It was fabulous. So if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Awesome.
Okay, so now we've got our batting down, and we want to do what we call a plumb line. It's just a straight line across. And we're going to unhook this. So there are 3 different ways that you could do your plumb line. You can use the little C-clamps, the horizontal channel locks, or you can use your Pro Stitcher channel locks, or I'm going to show you another trick. Can you see how I'm hitting that? I'm going to use that. I'm going to just pull up my bobbin thread first.
I like this one. This was kind of smart.
So I just stitch along, just hugging that back bar.
Awesome.
Okay. Johnny, will you cut those threads while I get this top ready?
Yes, I'd love to.
Okay, so we've got this plumb line here. Now I'm just going to take my quilt top, which I've already loaded. I'm going to pull it up.
And we wanted to use a actual quilt top this time to show the direction,
Yep.
so you can see it round up on the bar there.
Yep. So I'm just lining it up right with that plumb line that's already there. Johnny, what do you call it when people can pin? Is it magic fingers?
Magic in your hands, that's right.
Okay, I'm going to do magic fingers. So I pin that right in place there, and I would pin a couple more spots. Oh, there's my pins.
Sorry.
Ugh, they're hiding from me.
So you like to pin your top down
I do,
because you have magical fingers.
because I have magic in my fingers.
Oh, that looks great.
Hey, thanks. So a tip with pinning this top is that sometimes we get a little bit of stretch in our tops, especially if we've got wavy borders. So I like to really keep my top square to begin with. So if that means I need to pull this top in just a little bit so it's lined up and then just ease in some fullness as I go along, I'm going to do that. Same with on this side. I don't want to tighten it all the way out to the point where it's stretched out wider than the main part of the quilt. Okay, did we get those threads trimmed?
Yep.
Okay, so I just bring my machine back over again. And once you have that plumb line set, you don't necessarily need to do channel locks on this one. It's already pinned in place, but you can. I usually do, so it's, again, personal preference. So I'm just, again, going to stitch. If you do have extra fullness in your top, you can take your free hand here and just push down a little bit, and that will help ease in some of the fullness.
I love that trick there that you just showed, because sometimes you do get a wavy border. Sometimes, you know, if someone hasn't put the borders on quite right, or it's just wavy.
Yep.
And we are going to talk about vintage tops in the future, in a few weeks. So we'll talk more about that.
So I'm getting a little crazy. I probably should have gone a little slower, maybe pinned a little more, but you get the idea, right? So I'm going to stop right there, unpin. And you notice I didn't break my threads. I'm going to now put my ratchet down on my top, tighten it up, smooth everything out, and then I'm going to just baste down this side. So Johnny, you might have noticed I did not use my vertical channel lock.
No.
Sometimes I'm a rebel. Sometimes I don't do that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So with the vertical, a lot of times will just eyeball it. If it's a quilt that I'm really, really needing to make sure it's perfectly square, I will put the channel locks on vertically.
Right.
So I'm just going to come over to the other side of the quilt, baste down this side.
I think it's worthy of noting, we probably wouldn't really use this backing on this top. So if you're wondering why we're using this cute fabric on the top and this other cute fabric on the back that maybe don't go together, we just did this for your demonstration purposes. We will not quilt it out like this.
Oh, it would be lovely though.
I know, it's okay. Okay, so anything else we need to cover?
I would just like to say how important it is to baste those sides. There's a lot of controversy over whether to baste the sides or not baste the sides.
Right.
If you want your quilt to turn out square, baste your sides. Okay.
And
keep it square as you're going out. I didn't put my clamps on.
We
which
didn't put the
is
side
another
clamps
thing.
on,
Yeah.
so do your side clamps
Yep.
and baste down the sides. That's a great reason to keep it square as well.
Yep. And you only baste the section that you're in, and as you advance, then you would do the next section.
Uh-huh.
So before we go, I wanted to point out one other thing that we
Okay.
have on our frame.
And what is that?
It's called our Handi Hammock.
Okay.
And I'm going to pull up this batting so that everybody can see down here. We've got this hammock here. So on a regular size quilt, my batting would be draped on the floor. And I'd be stepping on it.
Right.
If you have animals, they like to play in there. So
Oh.
this Handi Hammock is really nice because you can just take your batting and lay it right in that hammock. It keeps it off the ground, it keeps it out of the way, and it's
I
a
have
really nice
a-
feature.
I have a puppy dog that likes to cuddle in the batting. It's not great.
Yeah. Cuddling's better
So. For
than
personal
chewing
quilts
and clawing.
only, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we end, let's talk about this quilt behind us here.
Yep.
This is another vintage top, one of our tops made by anonymous quilters, purchased maybe off of eBay or somewhere. And it was quilted by one of our educators, our national educators, Mary Yoder from California. So isn't that beautiful? I love that. The quilting she did is just amazing. All right, so thanks for watching Handi Quilter Watch and Learn. We look forward to seeing you again next week.